Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We are toward the end of this semester, 2021 spring semester. As you know, today will be the second to the last lecture. Next week will be closing this semester last end of lecture. And then April 30, as usual, as you did for midterm exam, I will send you final exam, online exam. I think my final exam must be even easier than midterm exam. If you have listened to my lecture, and if you have read relevant references and relevant chapters, and also relevant PowerPoints that I sent, you should have no problem. You should not have any you should not find any trouble. Okay, the weather here in Seoul is it's almost like early summer. I don't know. Last week, all of a sudden, weather turned around from quite cool weather to very warm weather. Right now, the campus where I'm located near Gwanang Mountain has beautiful flowers and everything, and temperature almost 22 degree centigrade. So I think the weather in Irkutsk and Minsk is also getting better. I guess you are getting spring flowers and warm weather and things like that. I also hope that COVID-19 situation is improving in the Soviet Union, in Russia. I heard that Soviet vaccination has been carried out effectively, and I hope things are getting better in Baikal area, I hope. Last year, before this pandemic came upon to us, I was planning to visit, Baikal area and your university, particularly Irkutsk State University, but because of sudden, introduction and sudden outbreak of COVID-19, I had to stop my travel plan, my offline lecture visit plan, and we had to suffer from just an online lecture last spring. And I was hoping that this year is getting better, and so that my scheduled visit can be repeated this semester. But again, we are in the middle of still outbreak of COVID-19. So probably we would not have a chance to get together. I wanted to see all of you face to face, also exchange Korean culture, Korean historical background, together with Russian historical culture background. And I miss those opportunities, I suppose. It's very regrettable, but let us hope that things can get better. And maybe next year, this semester, spring 2022, who knows, but I'm hoping that my postponed visits lecture could be made. Not this year, maybe hopefully next year. Okay, so today I will present North Korean economic matters. And as you all are aware of, North Korea is a very important part of Korean Peninsula, and has been close kind of political and strategic alliance with Russia and China, but always kind of at odds with South Korea or Japan or United States. To some extent, the significance of North Korea lies in the fact that Russia and South Korea and Japan cannot be effectively really connected unless North Korea opens up to some extent. I think entire Siberia area, the western part, eastern part of Russia, is somewhat blocked from the rest of the world due to pure existence of North Korea. In other words, North Korea seems to be blocking future kind of mutual exchange between Russia, Manchuria, and South Korea and Japan, even including Pacific coast area. So to some extent, understanding North Korean economy is very important first step for all of us, for not only South Korean, but also Russian students like you. But of course, we do know very little about North Korea. So recently, I was commissioned by Bank of Korea to estimate North Korea's capital stock. And after about 1 year and a half joint study with the Bank of Korea staffs, we publish it, of course, in Korean, North Korea's capital stock estimation. Why capital stock estimation is important in socialist country like North Korea? The reason is because everything was dependent on accumulation of capital to some extent in North Korean economy. So estimating correct estimates of North Korea's capital stock is the first stepping stone to some extent, first door opening to understanding North Korean economy. And then I was also commissioned by OECD. It was almost like 2 years ago. So just before last spring's outbreak of Corona-19, I was invited to present a paper in North Korea's, on North Korea, hosted by OECD. OECD is located in Paris, as you know, and OECD tried to host the first conference on North Korea, North Korean economy. And I was fortunate to be invited there and to present my research on North Korean economy. One thing is kind of a very interesting observation. When I arrived in Paris, so in late November 2019, so exactly 1 year and a half ago, right? 2019, November. for OECD seminar, first seminar. I arrived very late in the Paris airport, de Gaulle, Charles de Gaulle airport, and I had to check in just a nearby, almost airport hotel. You know, what I was really surprised at was that there was no official reception desk at the hotel, airport hotel. I think that was a Novotel hotel there in Charles de Gaulle airport or something like that. Because I didn't want to go to downtown Paris and try to find the right hotel in the midnight. So I just checked in, reserved hotel in the airport. You know, what they did, they had a counter, like a reservation, accommodation counter, but there was nobody. But there was people lining up to trying to check in. So what they did, they had a kind of mobile phone check-in system. So some lady or some guys are strolling around the first floor, lobby floor, and try to find who wants to check in. So then they called me my name, Mr. Pyo. Do you want to check in now? Yes. Then they had this kind of a mobile device, a little like a phone, and they just issued a check-in card. Check-in slip, and that's it. So why did it happen like that? That much Paris was in the middle of a very rapid structural transformation in service industry. They were trying to cut labor force as much as possible, reduce the time required for check-in. So it was almost like mobile check-in desk. Check-in desk does not exist. Just one person having this mobile device of check-in, and he handles everything. And also, their restaurant was open 24 hours. So that means if you are getting hungry as late arrival passenger, and you can just go to their restaurant and check out some food. And that much Paris was moving into efficiency, real efficiency, and efficiency you can never expect to find, even in Moscow. Are Moscow hotels opening 24 hours for check-in, for dining service? Not necessarily. I have never been Moscow, so I should not tell. I shouldn't be able to tell yes or no. But my guess is that Paris is well ahead in terms of efficiency and movement in terms of labor productivity, which we will discuss today, well ahead of Moscow or Leningrad, So let's see what we can find from North Korean economy. So let me begin my presentation on North Korean economy. Okay. So there are two papers, and I'm opening my own paper written with Dr. Lee and Dr. Yang at Korea Productivity Center jointly. And the topic is labor productivity in North Korea and implications for economic cooperation. It was, as you can see, the first OECD seminar on North Korean economy, OECD Paris, November 28, 2019. So I was talking about November 28th night in the airport, you know. Okay. So what is the labor productivity, for example? This is the picture taken by OECD in my lecture series. And contents, I first presented a kind of theoretical framework, you know, to analyze North Korean economy. The reason is because we need to understand some kind of theory, whether North Korean economy can be roughly described by a certain growth model, growth theory. The reason why it is important to understand theoretical background is to be able to predict the outcome of ultimate outcome of North Korean economy. Just a simple series of empirical studies, data may not be able to direct us toward understanding economic theory background of the economy in question. And I do that by estimating population and employment in North Korea and estimates of GDP or GNP and estimates of labor productivity, simply GDP output divided by population or divided by employment. So per person GDP output or per employed GDP output is estimated. And then what is theoretical and empirical implication for the future development in the North Korean economy? So this is my presentation. And the first introduction part, research background, is there is still a great deal of uncertainty regarding the future course of economic development in North Korea. US-North Korea dialogue relations on the nuclear issue may take at least several years to be settled, or it may never be settled. Please remember, this remark that I made was made during the period in which last year, the year before last year, 2019, at the time, North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-il, 지금 new leader가 누구지? Kim Jong-un was engaged in dialogue with the U.S. president, President Trump. You may remember Singaporean meeting, South Korean leader, President Moon, and Mr. Kim has made a very bold gesture, like trying to meet on parallel line, like crossing over parallel line in Panmunjom mutual security area. Things like that. But I was reserved in saying that US-North Korea dialogue on the nuclear issue may take at least several years to be settled, or it may never be settled. So I was rather guardedly pessimistic, or rather, conservative at least, in predicting US-North Korea dialogue. I don't know whether I was right or I was wrong. The future will tell us. But still, I was guardedly not optimistic. All we know is that the country has tremendous potential to be developed both in human capital and industrial capacity. Yes, we know North Korea has tremendous resources, including, scarce metals like Hito type scarce metals, and also some human capital. They are well disciplined, relatively higher level of education they received. North Korea remains as the last country to be opened to the world. What do I mean by last country? Vietnam was second to the last country to be opened. Now, as you have witnessed, what happened to Vietnam? Vietnam, with a really accumulated human capital, is making fastest growth in entire South and Southeast Asian area. Vietnam is doubtlessly number one country, making fast progress. Vietnam now even exceeds China in some sectors, all due to very aggressive opening of the nation. Okay. So my purpose of research is to explore a theoretical growth model based on poverty trap model based on Leontiev, Herod, and Doma, Barrow, and Salai-Mateng to explain turbulent episode of economic growth in North Korea. In other words, I did not want to write a paper or make a presentation by simply saying that North Korea failed a couple of policies, did not open, and therefore their poverty was almost there forever. In other words, bunch of empirical observation-oriented remarks may not be able to really helpful for us to understand North Korean economy. I wanted to find right, relevant theoretical theoretical framework by which we can explain and understand North Korean economy. The economy of North Korea had entered into a period, 1995-1999, of devastating economic hardship and famine due to the continued drought and flood from 1995, falling into a so-called poverty trap. In Korean, 고난의 행군. Okay, 고난의 행군. 고난 means hardship, economic hardship, political hardship, very devastatingly poverty-oriented, poverty-stricken hardship. 행군 means march. So this 고난의 행군, like a poverty march or hardship march, if we have to translate it into English, this march came from, you remember China economy, in Chinese economy. we typically identified 1950s and early 1960s. Chinese economy was suffering from Cultural Revolution, and before that, there was a large-scale famine. And there is in Korean so-called 대약진. 대약진 means really great long march. So under Mao, China also suffered from poverty and the famine, and that made Mao to stage great leap forward movement. Great leap forward movement was 대약진 운동. That means big jump, big march, great march movement was dictated by Mao to sort of recover from poverty trap. And therefore, North Korea's poverty trap during 1995 to 1999 is called 고난의 행군, hardship march, to recover from famine and hardship. It was kind of staged by North Korean authority. And this period, for some reason, this period started from sudden reduction of Soviet aid to North Korea, combined with Chinese aid cutback. So in other words, North Korean economy until 1995 was making kind of a swing vote. That is, at times they lined up with China. Other times they lined up with Soviet Union, Russia, and trying to get from both sides some degree of aid in crops, in fuel, in whatever. But that kind of swing movement, swing diplomacy, was to be over due to kind of all of a sudden Soviet Union cut back aid to North Korea. And China also followed Soviet Union, cutting back North Korea's aid to North Korea. North Korea also endogenously suffered from famine and flood and the drought. Flood or drought, and their agricultural production could not support their own population. So that's kind of very interesting observation and background story. So poverty trap in North Korea, I will explain how it can happen theoretically. As Barrow and Salai Martin model, as I will sketch briefly, an economy based on Herod-Toma model would in all probability reach one of two undesirable outcomes: perpetual growth of unemployment or perpetual growth of idle machinery. In North Korean case, this second case. North Korea seems to fall into the latter case of a perpetual growth of idle capacity because of militarization in all aspects of socio-economic life, when they fell into poverty trap in the middle 1990s. So North Korea from mid-1990s closed their door, did not trade with other countries. All militarization effort was made. And even if they produce something that is all military goods, not commercially fit, not sellable to foreign countries. Therefore, they fell into kind of poverty trap. Multilateral, institutionally based initiative is necessary. Based on the theoretical conjecture and implications, empirical estimates of the level of trend and North Korea's labor productivity, we propose, actually I'm proposing, a multilateral institutionally based initiative for economic opening and cooperation with North Korea. So my policy recommendation to South Korean authority, to our government, I always advocated not to deal with North Korea directly. Rather than giving North Korea bilateral aid, try to give aid to multilateral institutions like FAO so that North Korea can save their face. In other words, North Korea, by the very characteristic of socialist, democratic, republic nation, the power base is based on Communist Party. And Communist Party leader is a state leader. It's not really Western style democracy. Therefore, they act as a socialist nation, and what they are afraid of most is losing their face, nominal value in front of their people. So always approaching, and that's why I've been advocating rather than US North Korea direct talk, it would be more instructive, useful to design kind of old model six-party talk where Russia, China, Japan, and United States are sitting down together with North Korea and South Korea. This multilateral setup can save face of the North Korean authorities. And it could be more ideal for stage this multilateral sort of dialogue rather than bilateral dialogue. Maybe this is my personal opinion, my personal proposal could be against many other political leaders' ideas. At least it is against current South Korean regime. But I think the only solution we can find should be coming from multilateral, institutionally based initiative, of course, including Russia. Why Russia and Japan should be eliminated? Why, U.S. North Korea direct dialogue should be left alone? To my judgment, it could not be a viable solution. So first, this is a little bit more difficult subject, but I'm trying to explain why North Korean economy fell into poverty trap by using kind of theoretical growth model. And I can only give you very sketch picture, okay? So the picture is typical socialist economies, economic structure. there is very little interchange. Elasticity of substitution is almost zero between capital and labor. In other words, in traditional socialist economy, it is based on planning, central planning. You have factories, you have land, you have equipment, together with labor. Most of these firms, enterprises, are not private, but public. And Soviet Union is the same. So public enterprise, they cannot switch, they cannot get rid of one machine and put 10 people instead. They cannot get rid of 10 people and then install one computer there. In other words, flexibility between switch, substitutability between capital and labor are left on the hands of bureaucrats, public enterprise management. And they don't want to switch between capital and labor. So they are sitting there. So this is what we call Leontief production function, where capital and labor cannot be exchanged, cannot be made substitutable. Okay, so I will just only sketch. So at the beginning, this K means large K divided by L, per person machines, per person equipments, per person factory. So small k means K over L. So economic growth means what? Typical socialist economy, as K grow, as per person capital growth, previously in Soviet Union economy, for example, one person enjoyed only 1/10 of computer, 10 people shared one computer. Now everyone has a computer. So what does that mean? Per person computer, it has increased over time from 0 level to all the way down. As they increase computer, as they increase transportation machines, as they increase tractors per person on the farm, output, FK is production function. So increase. So this is almost linear expansion of increase in output. But at certain point, once this K reaches maximum level of B over A, output stalls. Output does not increase. Why? Suppose 10 computer plus 1 building, 5 machines could produce $100 worth of output in a factory. You keep increasing computer. Suppose you keep increasing machines. But suppose you don't have labor to support. Then machines, there are no one to operate machines. There are no software backup for computer. The commercial building is empty. Then output cannot increase. Output can be increased if some of these machines can be replaced by labor, can be sold out to foreign country. There has to be some kind of flexibility. So what happens? This is all theoretical model. You don't need all these explanations. I'm just describing very sketchy Herod-Doma model. As you increase K, N means population growth rate, and delta means depreciation rate. So I will give you some numerical example. And suppose population growth rate is 2%, depreciation rate is 5%, then 7%. Then savings rate is SA is A is the total assets, S is the savings rate. If savings rate is above 7%, you can reach growth. You can grow. Your economy can grow. But if your domestic savings is not reaching N plus delta, 3%, 2%, plus 5%, 7% level, then you are falling into poverty trap. So your output is going down because your savings cannot reach this bottleneck. Only when your savings rate is greater than N plus delta, you can reach up here, and then you can reach new equilibrium level. So this is the growth path to some extent. And this is the point that I'm making. As capital grow, you can go ideally from here to here as capital accumulate, right? But if your savings rate does not reach N plus delta here, like here, your economy falls back, goes to poverty trap. This is poverty trap. The only way to avoid this poverty trap is to increase this S. S means the savings rate of output. FK is total output. If total FK is 100, savings rate is 30%, 30 of output can be achieved. So the only way you don't fall into poverty trap is to lift up this curve. How can you lift up this curve? You have to increase savings rate. How can you increase savings rate in Soviet Union? How can you increase in savings rate in China? How can you increase savings rate in North Korea? Well, China opened up boldly. Currently, Chinese people's savings rate used to be less than 10%, now approaching 30%. That means this schematic picture becomes blue line, avoiding poverty trap. You are moving toward this side, right-hand side. So how can you achieve increase in savings rate? The lesson from Chinese economy is after opening up the economy. We don't care whether it is socialist economy or democratic capitalist economy. We do not care. The question is whether or not the society is opened up. Why? Because then your factories are not locked in military goods. Your factory can produce more consumer goods which are enjoyed by foreign customers. Foreigners demand. If there are foreigners demand for your products, you can increase efficiency, you can increase productivity, and you can go up. So savings rate can go up because your income grows, savings grows, so you can avoid poverty trap. So what I'm showing here is that truly to understand North Korean economy. Any closed economy in socialist tradition. You have to understand this Herod Doma economic growth model with poverty trap inherent to the model. Of course, these models are mathematically also established. So I don't want to get into mathematics. I'm just sketching what is poverty trap. How can you avoid this poverty trap? How can you avoid this poverty trap? To lift up this curve, blue line, so that you don't fall into this poverty trap. This is poverty trap, U-shaped poverty trap. Income is going back. Going back this way, income is reduced. This is poverty trap. Big valley, big trap. How can you avoid this? The only way is to avoid this poverty trap by lifting up domestic savings rate. How can you lift up savings rate? If domestic savings rate is short, falling short of total savings rate, foreign investments should be made. Foreign saving can lift up this domestic savings. So you need to lift up this curve into blue line. How can you lift up? You have to open your economy. Receive foreign investment, foreign grants in aid, foreign aid. Receive them. Also engage actively foreign trade with the foreign countries. Otherwise, you are locked in. Your economy can be falling into poverty trap. You don't need mathematics to understand this picture. Okay? So then I considered, can we estimate labor productivity in North Korea? And what is labor productivity? What is labor productivity? Why do we try to measure this? Let me explain that first at the factory level or commercial establishment. Let's say you opened up a little convenience store in very busy district of Irkutsk. Maybe 7-Eleven store. I don't know whether there is a 7-Eleven store in front of Irkutsk station, for example, bus station or railroad station, but any convenience store. I don't know the brand name of a convenience store in Russia, famous convenience store, but maybe 7-Eleven, let's say, store. Suppose you are operating 7-Eleven store in front of Irkutsk station. What is labor productivity? In this case, production means value added. How much you created. As you learned from value added growth accounting in case of Republic of Korea, South Korean economy. As I gave you midterm exam, value added can be created by combining labor and capital. And leftover is total factor productivity. So what is labor productivity? Labor productivity is nothing but value added divided by labor, number of people. This is labor productivity. Okay. So at commercial level, at factory level, at establishment level, like 7-Eleven store, suppose you are getting $100 value added every year, and you hired 4 people to run the convenience store in front of Irkutsk station. Then what is your labor productivity? $100 value added divided by 4, $25. That means per person you are earning GDP as much as $25 worth. Now, next month, I hired only 2 people. I cut off my labor force from 4 people to 2 people. Believe it or not, that those 2 people were very energetic worker, very diligent. And they sold value added as much as $100 again for 2 persons. What is labor productivity of 2-person shop? $100 divided by 2, $50. So labor productivity doubled. So in the aggregate, what is this story? Labor productivity is ultimately it is GDP, which is the aggregate concept of value. What was the GDP definition of GDP? All goods and services provided, produced in the economy within last year, mobilizing capital and labor. And this GDP divided by population or labor is nothing but labor productivity at top level. Most aggregated concept of this is most aggregate concept of labor productivity. Of course, the shop that I described, 7-Eleven store, can be aggregated. Suppose in Soviet economy, there are thousands of 7-Eleven shops. You can aggregate. You can aggregate their labor productivity with other shops. So all service industry labor productivity can be aggregated, not only in service industry, but also manufacturing and farming industry. You can aggregate labor productivity. Economy-wide, labor GDP divided by labor is nothing but most aggregate labor productivity. So what does it measure? Labor's efficiency. From the bottom level, 7-Eleven store story level, to the way, all the way up to Soviet economy, Soviet GDP divided by total labor force measures Soviet economy's labor efficiency, labor productivity. And you learned from my presentation, labor productivity is different from capital productivity. Capital is GDP divided by capital. It is also different from total factor productivity. Total factor productivity is residual. So the same 7-Eleven store. One store in front of Irkutsk station used 2 people as labor force and 2 computers and producing $100 every day in terms of their value added. The next door store, 2 people, 2 computers. But the next door store generated 200 value added GDP. Double. Why? Next door manager is a smarter guy. He knows how to attract customers. He has more human capital. So his store is more efficient than the other store. So his TFP, his store's TFP is higher than the other stores. 1 million people in North Korea, let's say, produced $1 million. 1 million people in South Korea produced $10,000. Then labor productivity in South Korea could be 10 times higher than North Korea. Can we say that South Korean labor is 10 times smarter than North Korean labor? No. It's a system. That's what total factor productivity. Who runs the country? How much they are devoted to their work? How much they are paid? Whether or not they allow private ownership, property right, things like that. That's what labor productivity means. And which is different from total factor productivity. But why then do I estimate in this paper only labor productivity? Because total factor productivity is more difficult to estimate. Why? Because total factor productivity to estimate, you need capital stock. You need something else to estimate total factor productivity. Labor productivity is as simple as that. You need value-added data. You need labor. That's it. But of course, labor productivity can only give us partial story. Labor's efficiency, not capital's efficiency, not managerial efficiency like TFP. Okay. So this is the picture. This is the data estimated by World Bank and United Nations Prospects 2019, United Nations Statistical Department, GGDC Growth Center at Groningen, Dutch Institute. And for example, Moon, he was one of the co-author of my book on Korea's textbook, Statistics, published in Japanese. He himself wrote a thesis on North Korea back many, many years ago. Of course, he's a second generation Korean Japanese. His estimate of labor product, all different over different years. And I cannot really discuss every estimate, but I can show you trend of population in North Korea. You know, population statistics is always very important to see overall picture, whether it is above the trend or below the trend. You see here 1970 through 1980 early period, two estimates are diverging. And my interpretation is this period is showing off population loss during 1965, 1970, this poverty trap period. Population loss affected birth rate. And this period, population growth was less than trend in North Korea. These are all estimation method. And I will show you just a picture. This blue line, 유진아, 이거 좀 크게 하려면 어떻게 해야지? 이것 자체를. 여기 보기에서.
네, 이게 지금 가려져서 그러는데.
이쪽으로 옮길까? 더 크게 할까? 크게 하려면 어떻게 돼?
잠시만요. 제가 해드릴게요.
글자를 읽을 수가 없어. Okay. Could be a little bit more larger, maybe this one. Yeah. So blue line is a population estimate by United Nations, employment estimate by World Bank, yellow line, purple line, employment estimate by International Labour Organization. So different estimates. For example, I attempted to estimate average share of employment by sector in North Korea. Agriculture mostly highest, but manufacturing, wholesale, retail, trade, next and third highest share of employment. So ultimately, what I wanted to show you my estimates and in comparison with other institutes' estimates, and this is, for example, labor productivity estimate using World Bank employment data and ILO employment data, different sort of employment data. Labor productivity was increasing up to 1990, then all of a sudden fell down due to 1995 poverty trap. Poverty trap shows here, exactly, and got stabilized at lower level. This is using World Bank employment data and ILO employment data. So for example, estimates are all different. United Nations data, Bank of Korea data, and Kim data, all different levels, but trend-wise, very similar. So this is our estimate. And I want to just to show you international comparison result. Comparison of labor productivity, we estimate between advanced and developing countries in terms of US dollar. United States here, Japan in green line, Germany, South Korea, orange line, North Korea. I tried to sort of a little bit beef up North Korea's labor productivity, but failed in beefing up, increasing above Vietnam level. A lot lower than Myanmar, a lot lower than Thailand. So it's the lowest end, North Korea's labor productivity. Even if I sort of try to overestimate their output, I try to underestimate their labor in an effort to beef up a little bit more labor productivity in North Korea. But I failed. So what is the theoretical and empirical implication for the future development in the North Korea? One of the significant theoretical implications from Herod-Doma model that I introduced, if some rich countries such as United States or an international organization such as the World Bank donate a discrete quantity of capital, lump sum, big money, to a country like North Korea that begins a low level of equilibrium per capita capital, the economy attains a somewhat higher steady state level of per capita, as I showed by that chart. It should be noted that only a sufficiently large donation or foreign aid or foreign investment can move K-curve, K-line, per capita capital into K-curve middle level and avoid poverty trap. What is the implication? Our empirical estimation of labor productivity in North Korea, based on World Bank estimates of output divided by ILO estimates of employment, reveals that there was a steady improvement in labor productivity from US 2000 level in 2000 to 2,600 level in 2018 in North Korea. But on the basis of theoretical conjecture and implications, empirical estimates of the level and trend of North Korea's labor productivity in comparison with other nations, including South Korea, we propose a multilateral, institutionally based initiative for economic opening and cooperation with North Korea. And the benefits will accrue not only to South Korea, but also Soviet Union, Manchuria, China, everyone in Northeast Asian area. For example, a consortium fund with donations and aid by countries of six-party Turk, the development loans by the World Bank and Asian Development Bank, and technical assistance by IFC and UNIDO could be initiated to help North Korea recover from prolonged stagnation. We also propose to put more priority to the trade regime change from a relatively closed economy to a more open economy, rather than to the aid loan packages to avoid North Korea's repeating poverty trap with economy-wide idle capacity. Okay, so that ends my presentation. 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, at OECD first seminar on North Korea. Okay. 공유 일시 공유 중지를 하고 then I have to go into here, right?
여기 초록색 아니고
화면 공유. 이건가?
여기 눌러주세요.
이거 공유?
아니요.
So this is the PPT version of OECD Economics Department of Working Papers, number 1607. By coincidence, the guy who invited me, Cohen, Vincent Cohen, he said he met me 20 years ago at IMF. I was a visiting scholar, as I remember, 1988, 89. I was invited by International Monetary Fund to work as a visiting scholar for 1 year. And Vincent Cohen, he said he met me there. He was head of, then he was working for Russian department. So he was specialist in Russian economy. And what a coincidence. And Cohen happened to know my name and had invited me to present at his seminar, the first seminar on North Korea. And after that seminar, Mr. Cohen and South Korean bureaucrat Mr. Bum, who was sent to OECD by Ministry of Economy and Finance, these two co-workers all edited a volume. And that was on North Korea, the last transition economy. And we can take a quick look at their sort of paper. Okay. They quoted the work we presented, we discussed today, right? So it was after my presentation. Okay. What did they present? They mentioned in 1965, famous economist Joan Robinson from United Kingdom. She referred to North Korean economy as Korean miracle. After a short visit to Pyongyang and Hamhung, a nation without that much poverty, everyone is adequately provided with food, clothing, shelter, Medicare, and educational opportunities. So by 1965, North Korea was in good shape as a socialist economy. Even some estimates were suggesting by 1965, North Korea was ahead of South Korea in terms of development. In 2015, Aihan Green and others, North Korea's rapid post-war industrialization put it ahead of South Korea by the mid-1960s. South Korea grew very rapidly, but real GDP in North Korea is reportedly lower than in 1990. Widespread chronic undernourishment exists. Okay, so after several introduction and severe recession in North Korean economy, as I mentioned, and these are listed information sources for the North Korean economy. For some of you who wants to write thesis on North Korea, this could be an important source of references. Estimated GDP level and growth rate, you can see it by 1995. This is economic hardship, 고난의 행군 period, and slowly recovered, but recently again falling down. Production trends by sector, they estimate service sector is growing up by opening partially to private market, imported, smuggled from China. We call in Korean 장마당. That means private markets are opened in like a real market situation. But all other sectors are not growing that much. How about cement production? One of the indicator of construction, cement production is declining rapidly in recent years. What about coal production? Even further decline. So there exists economic hardship in current North Korea. Steel production. Food shortages are well known. Food consumption is low and poor quality. Food supply and uses. You can see domestic availability is even lower than total utilization food use. Import supplement, import requirements, there's large import requirements for rice, maize, wheat, and barley. I believe Soviet Union is also providing some aid, food aid to North Korea. This is the list of natural disasters. Rice price, skyrocketing rice price between 2010 and 2013. And therefore they had to open market partially, 장마당. 2009, currency reform failed. This is box column story. And rice prices is exactly imitating exchange rate increase. So as North Korean economy's currency fell down in terms of value, exchange rate going up, rice price accordingly at the same amount proportion skyrocketing. exchange rates. Market exchange rate, North Korean won per US dollar, kind of stabilized, but up to 2013, skyrocketed. So large-scale depreciation of North Korean won per US dollar during this period. Currencies used in domestic transaction, 93.4% was North Korean won before 2012. After 2013, North Korean won only occupies 43% Chinese yen denominated. Chinese yuan dominates transaction currency. US dollar, very little. Poor electricity supply is problematic. And prime energy supply has been going down. Look at this petroleum supply going down. Electricity generation has been unstable. This is Korean Peninsula by night in 2016. Along 38-degree parallel line, north side is dark. Southern side is very light, booming. Seoul metropolitan area and Busan area, main entry port. From Russia, Vladivostok, there is almost like periodic shipment between Vladivostok and Busan, this port. Estimated official crude oil imports, very little. And this is main UN Security Council resolution on North Korea. Tourist entries declined sharply. Activity in the Kaesong Industrial Complex stopped after 2015. Trade with other Asian countries fell down. Only substituted by trade between North Korea and China. Other Asian countries' trade fell down. Only trade with North Korea and China, between North Korea and China, picked up a little bit. Changes in exports and imports after tightening of sanctions, both import and export fell down significantly. And trade balance becomes red and red, bigger than before, red figure bigger than before. An evolution of sectoral structure, for example, service only sector is surviving. The rest of the sector, including agriculture, declining. North Korea's special economic zones, selected general markets in North Korea around mid-2010, 장마당 statistics. And this is general markets in translation into Korean, 장마당 site place, site map. Number of mobile phones subscription in North Korea kept increasing. But still very low compared to South Korean standard. Almost like 1/10 of South Korean subscription rate. Evolution of central planning at different stages. Comparing North and South Korea in selected indicators. This is a rough estimate, of course. Population and birth rate. North Korea birth rate also declines, but not as fast as South Korea, which is a good sign. Population pyramid shows aging in both North Korea and South Korea, but a little bit less rapid in North Korea than South Korea. Life expectancy at birth is increasing, but not as much as South Korean life expectancy. Health indicators comparison. So with this health indicators, OECD report ends. Okay. So again, we are back to North Korean situation. Current situation is not good, particularly after United Nations sanctions are in effect. And we'll have to see what happens to North Korea's nuclear issue. To my judgment, North Korea can have an option of moratorium on North nuclear. Just stay as it is, promise that they will not install any more nuclear facility, but instead they opt for multilateral sort of economic help, economic aid package, aid and loan package. So, and they open up their trading regime. That seems to be the only viable solution. I don't know whether current North Korea United States dialogue can continue in promising way. We'll have to see. Okay, let me stop here and answer for your question. Let me open the floor. And please raise your hand if you have any question.
I have questions.
Yes, Evgeny?
Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes, I do hear you.
Okay. I have two questions, if you please. According to Economic Intelligence Unit, North Korea has more than 120,000 square kilometers of land mass. As we know, permitted size of kitchens, of a family's kitchen gardens have been expanded dramatically from 100 square meters to 3,300 square meters. Can we moderate delta in the Harrod-Doma model by privatization, quasi-privatizations of state land? as Andrei Lankov from Kookmin University in Seoul has said. And the second question, the regime in North Korea is also promoting special economic zones.
Mm-hmm.
Is labor productivity differs dramatically, substantially in Busan, Rason, for example, in one size, and Pyongyang in other? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, first, let me get back to your second question. Economic zone, special zone, probably in that area, their productivity may be even higher, a little bit higher than other non-economic zone area. But again, lifting up labor productivity for what purpose? Where are they selling their production? Domestic selling is limited. Their option for commercialization of military goods or military equipment is blocked. So they have no place to sell their products. So increasing productivity does not solve the problem. To solve the problem, they need a market. And the access to market can only happen, be realized to them if and only if they open up their trade, their regime. Okay, going back to the first question, of course, the North Korean economy, capital, machines, equipments are outdated. And they need new technology, new machines, new equipments, new technology. And since they are not opening up to trade, since they are not opening up their economy, they have no place, no resources to renovate their facility, to upgrade their facility. Okay, so they are blocked. So everything rests on whether or not they carry out regime change, the regime shift. Unless that occurs, nothing is working. Any other question?
Yes, I have a question.
Hmm?
My name is
Who is
Maria.
this? Haha?
Maria
Maria.
Chubarova.
Okay.
I'm from Irkutsk State University,
Hmm?
and I have a question. How do you think, if the North Korean regime were to fall, do South Koreans even want to unite the Korean Peninsula? Thank you.
Okay, the unification is ideal goal, but practically almost impossible goal. The reason is because two regimes, North Korea and South Korea, have been apart too many years. It has been already more than 60 years. So the current generation, for example, younger generation South Koreans, I don't think they really want to have unification. Because if the unification can be made peacefully, of course, they will get a long idea of unification. But even if there is a peaceful unification prospect, the loss to be borne, the loss to be suffered in South Korea will be too much. They have to pay a lot of money for unification toward North Korea. And I don't think current younger generation can afford it. So tragically, it is sad to tell you the truth, but that's the truth. North Korea and South Korea are becoming more and more remote nations, divided nations, with very shrinking opportunity of unification. That's very realistic assessment. Okay. Any other
Thank you.
question?
Yes, I have a question.
Alina?
Your Honor, yes.
Yes.
Is a threat of mass famine in North Korea on the same scale as in the 1990s?
Could you repeat again?
Oh, okay. Is there a threat of the mass famine in North Korea the same scale as in the 1990s?
Oh, in South Korea. Yeah. As I outlined, near 1990, middle of 1990 and 1975, up to 1975, there was some speculation and estimates that North Korea was even ahead of South Korea in terms of well-being, education, spread, and things like that. But after that, when they went through sort of poverty trap period near 1995, their economy sharply declined, and lack of their opening up of their economy, they started to suffer from very miserable economic welfare level. Per capita income was going down and output was going down. They suffered from food shortage, malnutrition, and things like that. That all comes from their rigid economic regime. For example, look at China or look at Vietnam. North Korea is yet to experiment neither model. Vietnam, China, they are so afraid of opening up their regime. The only solution they found is to cling to nuclear power. So nuclear power is like a mortgage to the North Korean regime. And they want to make sure that they hold on to regime by making maximum use of nuclear threat. But nuclear threat does not give them any welfare increase. The only solution, history tells us, is to adopt either China model or Vietnam model. And hopefully more Vietnam style opening up seems to be the only solution. Okay, Olina?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Again, if you have further questions, please direct to me by email, and I'll be happier to get back to your question again. Okay, next week, as a last lecture, I will share my PowerPoint presentation recently conducted at APO, Asia Productivity Organization, on COVID-19 and prospects for economic recovery in the world. My presentation will be about that topic, okay? Hope to see you next week. Thank you.